lost my singles. Hello. Hopefully everyone has managed to sign into the webinar okay, and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our first ever digital exchange, a series of free industry webinars brought to you by B&T and our dear friends at Big Mobile. My name's John Bastick. I'm the editor of B&T. Welcome here this afternoon. I'll be moderating this afternoon's session. And what a session we have to kick off with, titled Planning the Next 12 Months in Digital Marketing. No mean feat, I can assure you there. And who better to discuss the topic but arguably four of the brightest digital marketing minds in the land who join me this afternoon. We've got Jane Huxley, Managing Director of Pandora in Australia and New Zealand, Clive Dickens, Chief Digital Officer at Seven West Media, John Miskelly, Chief Digital Officer at Group M, and Graham Christie, CEO of Big Mobile. So big welcome to all you guys. Anyway, let's get straight into it. The first question, which anyone who signed up to the webinar would have seen this, we used this in the marketing spiel, and it said, we titled it, The Enemy of Beige. Too little critical thinking is being shared across the marketing industry, and a herd mentality is rife within digital. Oh dear. This fosters boring ideas, even worse, as well as impacting growth and innovation. I'll throw straight to Clive Dickens. Would you agree with that?
I'm definitely not renowned for being a glass half empty type of person, but I think we could definitely all collaborate more and definitely be a little bit less beige. And one of the challenges at the moment, there's a lot of products being hawked around the industry to have catch-all, solve-all solution providers, and that is there is a significant amount of fear and unknown in a lot of the decision making in the industry, and I think that is a very positive environment where we're actually seeing those products. And so if I get another person that claims to have solved every single business problem I've ever had, hitting me up on LinkedIn, I just scream. So inside our company, what are we doing about it? Well, we're trying to actively pull together some of the industry conversations via sort of IAB and Freeview and Think TV and Free TV. And even though they aren't necessarily all traditionally viewed as digital organizations, to try and have a cohesive conversation, putting consumer first and also client first as well.
Do you think that that's a problem of media as a whole? It's such a state of flux. No one knows where it'll be in 5 years' time. No one will be able to talk about programmatic, traditional media such as print. No one knows. So everyone's just sitting on their hands waiting for someone else to move?
I think there's, on one hand, we are sort of overwhelmed with the amount of new information available to us in any given day that can take us off course or concern us. So I think there's definitely a fear around that unknown. The economic conditions obviously remain very challenging as well. So most of the innovation involves some investment in time or money or both. So of course that is making it difficult. But also the knowledge gap is really, really material. And so having sessions like this and also other events to make sure we share. I mean, giving an example, I sit in an industry body, a couple of bodies, and people are still very nervous about sharing each other's insights. I was in a meeting this morning, I just gave the 3 numbers that the people wanted, and you can see across the room, people went, oh, I'm not sure I'm authorized to say that. Again, well, what was going to happen if the other people decided on the spot to tell me the 3 figures I threw out? The world was not going to end. And I did it because I wanted to try and stimulate the conversation. I also wanted to know where we stood as an industry, but in that particular forum, we didn't make a lot of progress, but in the end, you've just got to decide how you make contributions to those forums. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. Question for Jane. How much do you agree with that? What are the traps what traps are marketers falling into? Do you believe there is a herd mentality that's making everything boring? What's your view there?
I mean, I probably would come at it from both sides. I think in one case, there is an argument for a lot of beige going on in the industry. But I also see an extraordinary amount of innovation and new conversations happening with new customers all the time that sort of lead me to believe that there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we're going to kind of get onto data and some of those insights as we have this conversation that's bringing some of that to bear. But sort of to your question around, whether or not, what's going on in marketing and is it all just getting too much? I guess what I've observed is a flight away from basics. We seem to be unnecessarily complicating the industry and the business We have more specialist roles than we've ever had. We have insights coming out the wazoo. And I think that, the result of that is that we're making things really, really complicated. When you are looking at offering products to the market, whether it be advertising product or content product or physical product, there has been a real flight away from truly understanding what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And then when you understand what that problem is you're trying to solve, who are you asking to figure out whether or not you've got the answer? Are you going back to your customers again? Or are you all sitting around in a room and agreeing with each other and then bringing more specialists in to add more nuance on it? So I guess my view is that we've really moved about as far away from the basics as we need to get. We are unnecessarily complicating things and therefore making them more expensive. The reality is an interaction with your consumer needs to be the simplest thing in the world. And if it's not, that's when we all start to run around and chase our tails.
Question for John Miskelly there, obviously Chief Digital Officer at Group M. These two have said there's too much, well, summing it up in more my lay terms, there's probably too much data that's confusing marketers. You're probably the one person in the room with the biggest data head on. Would you agree with the sentiments echoed here?
I completely agree with both.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
I do. I think it's important for agreement across the industry to break it down into the point of view. And with Clive, Australia is a sort of a real hotbed of tech vendors and JV startup money coming here with the latest and greatest wares. What I'm finding interesting from an advertiser point of view is that tech, which is essentially software, is becoming a strategic discussion at a boardroom level for major advertisers, which is quite interesting. And obviously, we would encourage our advertisers to definitely look at it. But I think there's a lot of focus on the sort of tech nuances rather than focusing on the marketing outcomes. And then to Jane's point, I completely agree. There is just so much data involved. To quote Rob Norman, he would say that digital is very countable, not very accountable. And it seems that the point of entry for anyone to create data is speed and cost, and a lack of focus on accuracy. And I think we'd all sacrifice a couple of degrees of accuracy for consistency. Okay. Would be my view. So whenever you say a data advocate, yeah, I am, but for measurement, but consistent measurement across the board.
Okay. Question for Graham, obviously the mobile expert in the room. We've been hearing about our mobile phones. We can't leave behind. They're the greatest marketing tool ever. They obliterate all other advertising models. That hasn't happened. It isn't true. How much do you see? There's been a lot of hyperbole, for want of a better word, around mobile. It's not as exciting as many of its advocates have probably promised. Am I right in saying that? And where is it going?
No, you're wrong in saying that.
Oh, wrong.
It's every bit as exciting. It's every bit as exciting, I think. And I think probably now, although in many ways mobile and marketing on mobile is probably 10 to a dozen years old, it feels as if actually it's only really starting in earnest now. And as a mobile company, certainly we see as acutely, perhaps more acutely, really how the rush to drive efficiency into the distribution of marketing communications over mobile and therefore the arms race that is ad tech, how similar that has made a lot of the customer experience at the end of that. We've spent collectively as an industry 2 years building the ability to send a targeted creative message from point A to point G, and largely we can do that now. I think if we're going to avoid the beigeness and get back to what Jane's talking about, which is a focus on business outcomes, not on media outcomes, that we actually consider that infrastructure to be largely now built, and now we then turn our attention to the business of building brands properly on mobile, and that talks about craft and creativity and intelligence, rather than worrying for another 2 years about the infrastructure on which that sits on.
Right. Is the threat ultimately for marketers is all about return on investment, and there's a lack of risk taking because A, they don't want to upset the client, and B, adds to the CFO that God, I just lost all the money. Is there? I haven't worded that question, but it's a good question for Clive. I think Clive from Seven West. Are marketers too dependent on the technology? And we're talking about beige, we're talking about vanilla, we're talking about boring. we've lost that sort of human intuition? People are too scared to make a decision?
I think, well, if I look at it a slightly different way, which is the looking at the content. I mean, first of all, it is the best of time for mobile. We've all been working in mobile for a long time, and there's a little extract in that recent Steve Jobs movie that Danny Boyle made, which I'm sure wasn't a quote from Steve Jobs because it was very too modern, but effectively the power of the human brain with a computer at the end of your arm is almost unassailable. And that was allegedly his vision of the iPhone. The combination of human and science, the combination of art and science, the combination of content and data is really where the opportunity is. So for me, it's about we head towards the ad tech and the data a little bit too easily, and then that leads us down into decisions where we go, okay, well, we've got numbers, we've got a purely science or numerical decisions to make, and we can often forget that the best possible outcomes are always been the combination of human science, hybrid, art and science, content and data, and that's where obviously we, as being a content company, we're always going to talk about that because we believe that that is the real key element of that client's success. But we're not talking about here the size of the screen or broadcast. I'm talking about whether that engagement is on a mobile, in a hand, and how that story connects. And if we spend so much time thinking about the maths and thinking about the metrics and forget the storytelling capability of the medium, whether the medium is mobile, then we're definitely in a weaker spot.
Okay. Just bringing Jane from Pandora in there, is ultimately, I guess what Clive's saying there is the tech needs to learn us. We don't need to learn the tech. You, particularly what you do there.
Yeah.
How much would you agree with that, and where's that going?
Yeah, I think we are almost at the era, where we're going to move from push to pull for both content and for advertising supported models around content, although there are many, many other models, and we'll start to see the rise of some more of those as we get smarter about how we target people on mobile. I think, in the past, it's been kind of a dumb science in terms of looking at browsing or buying behavior as a proxy for who I am and what I might like to do. Think the very early days of Amazon, for example, people who read this might read that. And you think, God, no, I don't want a book on feeding dogs in Siberia. That's of no interest to me, but that's what that site thought. We're moving, quite far away from that now, where we have to get to a point where we can start to subliminally serve the right advertisement at the right time based on a whole range of things. So not just the content that they're consuming, but the time of day, the type of device. And as we push forward with technologies that pinpoint lat-long, for example, latitude and longitude, so almost like beacon-like services without a beacon, and we can talk about how difficult it is to roll those out, we're going to get to a point where we start to be able to the consumer is essentially pulling the right advertisement towards them rather than having it pushed towards them. A simple example might be the delivery of a coupon for a pizza as you walk past the pizza shop, but it also may be introducing new products and services that you didn't know you wanted, which would be the holy grail of marketing, based on a range of things that publishers know about you in aggregate. So, knowing that it's likely that I'll buy a family dog in 6 months' time, and in 5 months' time I start getting targeted by that information, you literally want the consumer to think, well, shit, how did they know that? Now, we're going to border on Big Brother, right? There is a lot of fear around where we're headed in terms of being able to have the right message at the right time to the right person. But I think a lot of that is generational. A lot of the I accept generation are going to give away a lot of those rights in return for the convenience, the choice, and the cost of the services that they'll receive in these new models. So out with the push and in with the pull, I think is where we're at right now, or on the verge of.
Good point. Just to bring John Miskelly in there from Group M. Just we touched on there is an old thing that we talk about targeting ads that people do want, bordering on being just downright creepy. You're probably the data master in the room. Tell me about
I don't know what that's
how marketers can avoid just being downright creepy.
Listen, there's still a certain degree of advertising. To sell products, you need to drive scale. I mean, at the end of the day, most of our clients are about reaching audiences of millions of people as opposed to thousands of people. So from a data point of view, you don't need to sort of get too downright and creepy as long as you're getting a nice spread your target audience. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we see lots of these different interesting innovations, but they only hit about 1,000 people. And you still need to try and reach millions and millions of people to be able to try and shift the sort of needle when it comes to driving sales or brand uplift and things like that. So from that point of view, I think you can try and strike a nice balance between what is essentially mass marketing, but not quite one-to-one creepiness.
Okay, good point. Just understand the time is absolutely of the essence, and I think this is the pivotal question of the day. Where we are now, we're in 2016, and we've talked about there is a lot of confusion, there's a lot of information. Marketers, and I speak to marketers, are confused from a whole raft of what they should be doing, an abundance of tech. Graham from Big Mobile, your advice to marketers, what they should be doing now, so they're in a good position not only in 2017, but in 5 years' time in 2021. Your advice to marketers now, what should they be doing?
Well, I mean, I think now they should be looking genuinely about how to be different from their competitor set. Because I think if you look at most categories, most verticals, and you look at the way that most companies, the top 5 or top 10 companies, let's say the top 5 companies in each of those verticals, they're probably behaving very similar to each other. Sure, there's going to be some innovations at the edges here and there, but actually there's going to be a degree of conformity, quite a large degree of conformity. So given that we believe that the abilities to do very smart things at scale, as John is saying, now, we weren't in that position as an industry 2 or 3 years ago, but we are today. It feels as if now is the time to be taking alternative and probably bolder positions in your category in the way that marketers did 20 and 30 and 40 years ago to really make those brands in the first place, to create those brands. Now, given that infrastructure is in place, they should be adopting a more aggressive, more restless, more innovative stance around strategy development and implementation. Because a couple of years spent doing that now is probably going to help really drive momentum for the next 5 to 10 years for that brand.
Okay, question to you, so similar question, Clive, you've obviously got a strong opinion on it. Young marketers out there, perplexed, not knowing what your advice to them? If they could do one thing, what was the one thing they should be doing?
I think it's really about going back to marketing 101 and actually working out what you're trying to achieve, what problem does your product solve, how do you know it's a problem, and how are you going to measure that you solve that problem, and actually not get too distracted by the myriad, hundreds, possibly thousands of solution providers who will tell you, I can solve your problem for you, and just really distilling down what is it your product is attempting to do.
Just on that, we do hear the term snake oil salesman panic about, and you've had strong views of this. How was it, you know, B&T, we get 10 new IT companies a day approaching us with their, how do you cut the wheat from the chaff or the crap from the, how do you know? Everyone's, you know, flying their flag, singing his praises. How do you? There is
no secret apart from, you know, you just have to, you know, inside our company we have a bit of a process where we try and weed out these inbounds and that's normally some very obvious techniques around just to do some cursory reading and some research into what they're selling and checking some references even before you take a call or respond to an email. But then what we'll also do is just try and take first meeting as a Skype meeting only, because that means that you can normally decide quite quickly inside 10-minute Skype call whether they're doing something. But there is no, in the end, there is, ever since I arrived in Sydney a couple of years ago, I became fascinated by how the Australian market is viewed by suppliers and tech providers and international inbounds, where they sort of see our overall very strong economy. I know we've had a very difficult 6 to 12 months, but overall we still are having a strong economy. And I think what happens is people just target us and they try and gouge us. I remember at SCA we laughed and said every single inbound proposal was a solution around 100 grand, and you know, and everything now at 7 everyone says it costs about $250,000. And I turn every page, oh well, surprise, surprise, everything's 100 grand or $250,000 now. Is
there a gullibility there? You know, we're from San Francisco, we're from Silicon Valley, you know.
We live in the most beautiful country.
We're a little bit gullible,
and people just love to come, right? So
right. Oh, okay.
It's sometimes as simple as everyone's going, oh, I love it here, and they just want to find a reason to sell stuff here. But anyway, we're probably off topic a bit. But really about what marketers can do as they're coming through, actually not much has changed, but everything's changed. What I mean is that you go back to that old marketing adage about which part of my marketing is working, and really that's some of those classic skills around marketing is still incredibly relevant, and try and work out what is it your brand wants to achieve, what is the problem it's solving, and then look for the best solutions to that, and not get completely overawed by all the myriad of options that are presented to you who claim to be solution providers.
But one thing we probably haven't touched on, which I think is important, a question to Jane at Pandora, how's the consumer changing? We talk about tech firms, we talk about the CMOs, we talk about the brands, etc., etc. But surely, where all the consumers are getting far more savvy, they can smell bullshit, for whatever better word. Again, putting that context of the question of what marketers should be doing, etc., etc. How do you see that from a consumer's point of view?
Extraordinarily savvy, and not unlike us in the industry more broadly, bombarded with choices, right? So much as we might like to look at various decisions we need to make and think, oh my God, what criteria do I use to select here? To Clive's point, the consumers are feeling exactly the same way. Just to tie it back to the previous question, one of the things that I think that the young marketers should be doing is really having a very relentless eye on the consumer. And I think that the layer of tech has really distanced us from really understanding what the consumer is doing every single day. Now, in my role as MD at Pandora, the first thing that I do every morning is the customer service for Pandora for Australia and New Zealand. I do it for a couple of reasons. It's easy. Software as a service means we can all be connected to the inquiry@yourcompany.com email address, phone line, whatever. We can all be connected to that every day. And that is where the stories of your company are. It's really what people are saying about you. The second reason I do it at Pandora is because it's a happy place to live, right? People love Pandora, they love the service, and we get a lot of thank yous and a lot of real stories about music and the impact of music in people's lives. But the lesson is the same. Stay very, very connected to the consumer. Never take your eyes off them. And I think that history is really littered with companies that took their eye off the game. And I remember about 20 years ago when I was working at Microsoft in tech, reading a book, which I think today is probably still one of the finest business books out there, called Who Moved the Cheese? Now, Who Moved the Cheese is a very simple parable about a software provider or a provider of services going back to the same place every day, selling the same thing, and they go one day and their customers have moved. And in this case, it's the cheese in the fable of the book. The companies that survive go and find the new cheese. The companies don't survive, keep going back to that same place, and eventually they starve to death. Now, that is as true as it was 20 years ago when John Grant wrote that book. And I definitely encourage people to go and have a look at that. It's now a 7-minute video on YouTube for people who find turning the pages of a book exhausting. You can now go and watch that online, but the lesson is the same. Don't take your eye off the prize, and don't be confused about what the prize is. It is your customer.
Throw that to John Miskelly there. Obviously, what you do at Group M is very client-focused. So would you agree that maybe in all this and all the data and the programmatic, the end user, the consumer, the viewer has been ignored? As someone said the other day, if you ask a TV viewer what they want, and it's an old adage that they'll just want more MasterChef and more My Kitchen Rules. So
listen, I think the consumer consumption of media has obviously has changed a lot, and it's harder to find those eyeballs through commercial advertising. But I don't think the users have changed their way. Consumers have changed their behavior toward brands massively. I mean, the idea that someone jumps on Facebook and goes, "Oh my word, this is the best brand I've ever seen," it just doesn't happen. And when people are falling in love with your brand, they just don't buy it anymore. They don't suddenly jump on Twitter and start slagging off. There's obviously a couple of examples like that. Just back to what Jane said about the basics, and the basics of measurement, and the basics of consistency. And if you can reach them through digital advertising in a sort of clever, targeted way, I think you'll still be okay.
Okay. Can I just jump in?
Yeah, I was just about to throw to you.
So I think the biggest enemy of considering the consumer in the ecosystem that we're all operating in today is time, or lack of time, or the time pressures that we've imposed on ourselves and we impose on everyone in the value chain. And I think the less time you have to consider the consumer, the more time you're going to end up with stuff that looks like your competitors, or sounds like your competitors, or feels like something that you've done before, because you probably have done it before. You've probably done it a dozen times before. So actually, if there was one thing that I would say that we all need to get better at, is to buy each other time to develop the standard of strategy and the standard of implementation that the consumer deserves. Because right now, I think they're at the last thing you consider that in the first thing.
Yeah, and a strategic, a good strategy should be, what are we going to stop doing? I don't think I've ever seen that, right? It's like, here are the 10, here's what our customers doing this year, here's what we're going to build, here's what we're going to buy, here's what we're going to bring out. And yet I think that the killer strategy for next financial year will be, here are the 10 things we're going to stop doing.
Yeah.
Here are the 5 things we're going to kill. Here are the 20 things that are no longer important to us, because people will always fill a void with stuff that needs to get done. But real leadership around strategy and around some of these issues, I think, stops with exactly that, stopping. What are we not going to do anymore?
Yeah. Just, I think it's silly if it's not touched on Google and Facebook. Clive, you touched on it before. It becoming behemoths, well, they already are, and taking up enormous amounts of marketing spend. How do you see the Google, Facebook play out? Will they continue to just soak up all the cash, or?
Well, it's a couple of themes developing. I think what I love about the digital economy is the next big disruptive force is just around the corner for any company, including ones who have been the disruptors in the last 10 years. And, you take a look at Snapchat's incredible rise amongst 12 to 20-year-olds. That is amazing and is a massive threat to Facebook in terms of time on screen. So first of all, I'm not of the view that the big will just get bigger anyway. I think there will be this incredible economy we find ourselves in. It means that there is just around the corner the next set of ideas that will change. Draw your attention to a product that completely threw into my house about 3 to 6 months ago, that's starting to challenge Snapchat's dominance, which is a product called Musically, which is a lip sync product. It's huge. I mean, it's a private company. It's in every single top 10 app store in the world. Most people never heard of it, and it's challenging screen time against Snapchat. And will it be a comet? Who knows? But the point is that I'm pretty confident that we will start to see disruptive forces. Second thing is about measurement. You can't mark your own scorecard. You can't mark your own exam results. And both companies need to accept, which they are now accepting, that the industry needs independent accountability around audience behavior inside those networks, particularly around video in YouTube and Facebook. And that is coming, and that's going to be critical. I would say that the brands and the agencies should be pushing harder for that. There was no obstacle in that at all, other than reluctance at the top level, and we need to have complete visibility. Here in the Australian market, we have more sophisticated measurement in that area. I mean, don't know if you're aware, but in Northern Europe and North America, they're still talking about UBs, rather than unique audience. We're not interested in browsers, we want people. We only ever wanted people. And amazing how many European and North American tech and content businesses are still talking about browsers. Here, we meant to move to people about 3 to 4 years ago, because our browser audience came larger than our population. And people went, hang on a second, how does that work? Because people wrongly assumed the browser was a person. And we've moved now to monthly DRM ratings, and we're going to move to daily digital content ratings, and by the end of the year, which includes all social networks. That's a massive milestone, and daily ratings around independent accountable ratings will also start to make Google and Facebook more accountable. And within that, we will also then see what people are consuming inside those networks, because there is no Google content, there is no Facebook content. It is actually, whether it's my son's YouTube channel, or someone's dialed in content marketing, or whether it's a corporate's channel as well. So really the barrier that will also, the development that's going to stop those companies getting bigger and bigger, is just the acceptance of new forms of disruption and new forms of accountability and measurement, which I think is important.
Okay, Stunning. Just a question for Graham on the mobile sector. We've talked about big data, we've talked about all the technology available now. Lots of people would still say, and there's an argument of mobile, that the creative is still, for want of a better word, crap, for want of a better word. How much is that in terms of marketers, like a brand, we talk about brand storytelling and brands telling their stories. how a marketer is probably not getting that right? Would that be true? Or are those criticisms of mobile true?
I think a lot of marketers are most outside their comfort zone when they're talking about effective communication over mobile, and they're looking to their agency partners and specialists like us to help them. So for many, the irony is, to me, that when they look at their own customer, their own target audience, and they're looking at their usage, digital usage, mobile plays a large role in that usage and right across the day part. So it's a centricity within their consumer space, but it's not a centricity, if you like, within the CMO department. And often mobile is I think 87% of the time, the mobile component of a campaign is started to thought about within the last 5% of that whole campaign planning space. And I think that says to me hesitancy, probably not enough talent within the CMO team, and perhaps not the right settings in terms of agency partnerships. I think how that can change is to do what, for instance, Unilever has done across the region, which is to say, take a bold stand, which is to say by 2020, mobile is going to be our #1 marketing channel, and have, from an HR and a people point of view, KPIs for every single person around mobile. And then it's no surprise that they were awarded Mobile Marketer of the Year across Asia Pacific last year, and I helped judge the Smarties, which is sort of the APAC awards, and out of 800 entries, 187 of them were from Unilever. And so you've got a company there which you would think is, well, that's a packaged goods business, it's going to take forever to change that and to get them. Actually, they've cut right across that and said, it's only going to happen if we institutionalize, if you like, a KPI setting across our entire business, and they're reaping the benefits of that.
Okay. Question for you on that side. So why do you think on Facebook, 70% of Facebook spends on mobile? If you extract it to normal, why is that sort of less than 10%?
Well, because I think it's just convenience. I think it's just sheer convenience, and no one used to get fired for buying IBM, and I think that's largely the point.
I think it's because Facebook is opt out, whereas most mobiles opt in.
That's correct. Yeah.
So whenever you have to opt out of something,
yeah,
you barely do it.
Yeah.
Okay, we promised everyone half an hour, and we're just about out of time, so I wouldn't mind just going around our panel for one last time, one last question. We'll keep it short and concise. The question is, which I need to think of, the question is, obviously we're talking about where the future of marketing, where it's heading. So one sort of top line sentence to the listeners, our audience out there, where Clive Dickens from Seven West, what your advice in one sentence?
If the audience starting are predominantly representative of brands and agencies and customers, and let's make that assumption for this answer, then demand independent, aggregated accountability around digital metrics that go across all forms of digital. Don't allow any company to mark its own scorecard, whether how big they are, and don't be intimidated by their siliconness, and just say that I want to know, I want to have an independent, verifiable measurement system.
Jane from Pandora.
I just sort of to echo a couple of the themes today, for me, it's about the basics, right? You've got a small screen, a small amount of time on mobile. Don't get too clever about it. The easier and more seamless you can make that conversation with your customer, then the better the result will be. And that is, from the marketing perspective, sticking to the basics. From the consumer perspective, being very clear about the choices that you're making. And when those two meet each other, I think we really open up a new universe for people.
Consistency in the form of consistent measurement, as Clive said, but consistency in the form of, I guess, similar levels of trust across each player in the supply chain, that everyone should be judged by the same standards.
Graham, Big Mobile.
Obviously from a mobile perspective, I think it's about, I like Jane's point about doing less, and actually just trying to do less. We've got a scalable, large-scale marketing channel. You can reach who you need to reach, when you need to reach them. Start taking care about how you really communicate, and you really connect, and you really drive a business outcome, rather than plastering poor communications in front of them. So it's a time of change, and just mature the thinking around mobile.
Okay. I think I'm exhausted. Hopefully we've exhausted you. I hope you're all asleep at your desks out there. Anyway, we thank you for tuning in to our first Digital Exchange webinar. I'd just lastly like to thank Jane from Pandora, Clive from 7 West, John Miskelly from Group M, and of course our host today from Big Mobile, Graham Christie. Thank you, everybody. And the next one, I'm led to believe, even though I'm not sure what the topic is so stay tuned to BNT, and we'll give you all the running updates on the next Digital Exchange, which is on Wednesday, the 15th of June. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Cheers.